And I think we could definitely translate about the Stephen A. Smith thing, because he's now saying he won't close the door on running for president. And I think that he's somebody that I've heard the most apolitical people I know be like just bros that like watch ESPN are like, yeah, I'd vote for Stephen A. Smith. And people register for the vote to vote for the first time, not because they care about politics, but because he's the kind of person that would ruffle the least amount of feathers and bring out the most amount of people to vote. So what do you guys think about Stephen A. Smith?
I mean, you want to take this one first, Jeremy?
Sure. I mean, he does, when he does talk politics and stuff, he does tend to, it sound appealing, pretty good, or, even kind of straddle that, kind of general people pleaser line. I don't know, it's necessarily about, let's say he were to get elected, if I'd be incredibly excited, but that's just me. That's just a preference. And I mean, at this point, I really wouldn't care. Somebody normal that, would at least ask somebody, hey, is this legal? And then they would say no. And then, that would be great. That's about where my standard is at the same time, obviously, that's about the only thing that is needed of a president at this point. But I definitely maybe, hope for somebody else, but, I wouldn't be necessarily mad at it. Especially given a little bit of time coaching, actually developing, positions, or, as you learn about, what's really interesting is the more you learn about how things work, you start to just can almost excuse or understand anything. But once you do learn how things work, it's that you get better at just understanding and explaining and things. And I could definitely see that as a future for him. So I mean, like I said, I wouldn't be mad at it. Probably prefer someone else, but I wouldn't be mad at it.
No, I mean, me, Stephen A. Smith, I've been watching him forever. I'm big into sports. Seth knows that. I watch. I'm a big Golden State Warriors fan. We still got to go catch a game in San Francisco. See the Warriors. I love his sports. In terms of his policies, I agree with Jeremy. He doesn't really have hardcore stances. And it's always okay for that to happen when you're not required to have to speak up. So a lot of times where a lot of politicians, like this happens a lot with The Rock. People are like, oh my God, I want The Rock to run for president, right? These guys are great because they are apolitical. And people like them because they don't really have an opinion that kind of sways you one way or the other. Once they get into the politics, it becomes very hard to win a primary like that because people are like, well, I believe in this. What do you believe in? And he's like, well, I believe in this Republican stance way over here. And people are like, why would I vote for you?
So, right, and especially to the the way that our primaries work. The primary base is, I mean, Republicans, Dems. I mean, there's a certain set of people that vote in primaries, and it's not a lot of us,
It's not.
And they are very ideological, and I mean, pluck 2016 for everyone again, and I mean, you literally had pretty much, half Bernie and half Hillary in it. And which are just two totally different ways of governing, approaching things, and both would not be bad candidates or be bad, in their, as the president, but yeah, two totally different things. And, it was definitely a fight between the two. And so that's why I favor bringing back the smoke-filled rooms and leaving things to the convention. But but I mean, even then you can, we know that gets messy on top of it too. I mean, what was that? Dem ran basically a convention all summer. back
Yeah.
in the, I think it was the 20s. Before they went to, and then was it 68, and then that's when they started moving more to primaries and letting conventions just basically being a party
A
party
party thing.
convention.
Yeah.
Versus a very serious business of picking our nominee. But there's definitely something to say about those differences, and you get the know-hows to know, versus getting that fight between a lot more people. So
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think that when you look at people like celebrities, pretty much this always happens to celebrities, when they get typecasted into the political thing, I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but it's very rare that a celebrity's going to risk their money to take a real position on anything. They're going to
yeah.
take the populist view on a lot of things because a lot of things, it doesn't affect their money because guess what? Generally, people believe this, and the fashion that doesn't really believe it is a very minute fashion that doesn't believe it, and it doesn't really overall hurt their bottom line as a celebrity. So I always take what celebrities say with a grain of salt because I know everything they do they kind of get screened by the producers, and the producers like, yeah, you have these type of voters, so you can't say that. Or you have this type of, because all that stuff, a lot of people don't realize. A lot of politicians, a lot of them are talking to you based on data. Like we have the DeSantis is like the king of that, and I guess you guys know the Florida governor. It's like everything that comes out of his mouth it's been run and tested before it says it, and he's very scripted like that. Trump is to a certain degree, but not really. I mean, he knows I believe that he knows the data, but he's going to say whatever he wants to still, even with, even with that information. So he's a little less scripted, but a lot. I would say 80% of politicians are very scripted in terms of they know exactly what to say at what time. If you saw this when I ran, it was like we spent 2 or 3 hours. It's like, hey, we're going to this meeting. What is it that like I'm not very scripted. The way I work is I take a stance on something and I try to find the commonality of that stance with the audience that I'm talking to, right? So even though my position may be extreme to that audience, I find the common elements within my position to have a way to connect. And so Seth makes fun of me all the time. He's like, "Hey, it seems like you're switch flip flopping." It's like, no, Seth, I'm just kind of reasoning with the audience. I'm not gonna go to an audience that believes in like no deforestation and start talking about you know lights and electricity and up that's just know your audience when you speak. So I to put a cap on that. I like Stephen A. I think he's a great orator. He's very good at understanding who listens to him and understands what they like and what's they're looking for. I just don't think that's people don't pick presidents like that. People pick presidents by, at least in my opinion, a person who truly, truly believes in what they believe in. And what the cards may fall, what they may. I mean, I can tell you this: a lot of Trump supporters are Bernie supporters, and these guys are on completely opposite sides of the thing. But people believe them when they believe in their convictions, and that's I think ultimately what people always look for in politicians is authenticity, and do they truly have a conviction to make a change? And I think that's what kind of hurt us in the last race. I feel like we didn't have a candidate that people believed that she was strong in her convictions of what where her stances were. I think a lot of people thought she would just they didn't think she would be Trump. They know she would be more educated than that. But I think what they really ultimately decided was that I truly don't know who she is. I don't know if I give her this position, what she's capable of doing. Now, you know, we may as progressives think that's ridiculous. You voted for Trump. That's the most unpredictable guy ever, right? So if you want something that's surefire, you should, Trump is not your guy. But I think what truly the fallacy in our position as progressive in that respects is that we tend to forget that progressive policies are popular, but saying progressive is not. And so we always tend to forget that. And so we
Yeah.
do a very bad job sometimes as progressive as narrating or articulating our story to the common man. And so I think that's something that we definitely need to look out for. You want to say something, Seth?
Mhm. Yes. I you made 2 points, one point that I agreed with and one point that I disagreed with at the end there.
Sure.
You were talking about how like the thing that people ultimately vote for is like the conviction aspect, like if they really stand for something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that part is true
Yeah.
because I like we just established, Trump doesn't really stand for anything specific.
Yeah.
Is wavery on every single. I feel like Obama was kind of similar in which he's
Mm-hmm.
differed from what he campaigned on versus what he actually did. But
Yeah.
then you rebounded your point. The main thing is authenticity. People want to know that the thing that you're saying is derived from within. It's not from the donor class. It's not you catering to what I want to hear. I think that is why I would put, having thought about it, I think this right now, Stephen A. Smith has like the second highest odds to become the Democratic nominee out of any candidate. And I think the number one person would probably be Tim Walz still, honestly, because he got the name
Mm-hmm.
recognition and he's really kind of getting his stride right now with his campaigning, stuff like that. He's got fairly broad appeal, and his sort of Republicans or moderate people that think that they don't like him have not seen enough of him to really have that convicted stance. I don't think that that's something that would last. He doesn't have a lot of baggage. So I think Tim Walz is still the best chance the Democrats have. But other than that, I think Stephen A. Smith really taps into the antidote to Trump, of Trumpism, which is being the Democratic Trump. And I think that we were talking about him in a primary. I don't think that him being super well positioned in his own views is harmful to him. Now, in a
Mm-hmm.
primary, you would think so. The Democratic primary, there's a lot of more liberal voters, but as we saw in the 2020 primary, the thing that outright won wasn't conviction, wasn't being stance, and it was ultimately about electability.
Yeah.
And especially after how horrifying these last 2 months have been and how bad these next 4 years are going to be, all people are going to want, the Overton window is shifted. All they're going to want is electability. All they're going to want is somebody that can beat the next Republican, which is going to be J.D. Vance. And Stephen A. Smith is absolutely that person. He's likable. But the most important thing is that, like I said, he's going to bring in formerly apolitical voters into the Democratic primary. That's what won about Trump, or that's what made Trump win in 2016. It wasn't that from the get-go he had the most popular policy positions. It was that he brought in a brand new base of people who had not ever been political or considered voting or cared about it prior.
Yeah.
And I think that being, most moderate in the most like real sense. I mean, we have moderates in Congress and they're very technocratic and anti-populist. They're very like corporate centrist. He's the opposite of that. He's centrist in the populist kind of way, in which even though he has much more capitalistic, like he's rich kind of views, but he is ultimately somebody who embodies like the energy of just the apolitical person, the middle of the road guy who just is sick of the bullshit, wants some sort of stability, but also wants somebody to speak for them. And I feel like Stephen A. Smith is just he's not gonna cater to either side, and that's really gonna bring in a lot of people that would not otherwise vote for Democrats. Like you had just said, Bernie bros and Trump bros are very similar people. I think a lot of the Trump base would see J.D. Vance versus Stephen A. Smith. And which primary do you think they would vote in? I honest to God think that a large amount of former Trump voters, especially if they're disillusioned with Trumpism, that Stephen A. Smith embodies that same energy, that the same energy that like RFK embodied, all that type of voter, the anti-establishment, like kind of both sides are the same, but I'm going to vote for Trump because at least he's not part of the system. That kind of voter is going to go for Stephen A. Smith, and they're going to vote emphatically in a primary because he's really he's not a liberal, he's not a conservative like he says. He's middle of the road kind of guy, and they're going to come out and turn out in numbers. So I feel like initially, just like Trump in 2016, he's going to pull it 3%. He's going to do horrible at the beginning, but like once he gets on that debate stage, it's over. There's not a single Democrat that could stand against him in a debate. Maybe Tim Walz is really good at playing his role as like he's like the positive guy where he's you're comfortable with him. He makes really good points and he can deliver lines really well. But Stephen A. Smith is going to embody that anger, that passion, that's the thing that like we all feel. A vast majority of Americans feel the Trump administration. He's going to be the anti-Trump administration guy. It doesn't matter what he stands for. He's going to actually be able to stand against Trumpism in like a way that doesn't make them feel stupid. He doesn't look down on the Trump supporters in that way. He is already talking to a lot of conservative talk show, Candace Owens. I can't remember who else has been on his show, but he's reaching those audiences in a way that I don't think that a standard Democratic politician would be able to, because the main thing that keeps Republican, conservative-leaning voters from considering a Democrat is the D next to their name. It's not the ideas. It's the fact that they're liberal and they're Democrats, and Obama, Hillary Clinton, that's who they associate with. Stephen A. Smith is just a regular Joe guy, and he might be more Democratic-leaning, but at the end of the day, they see him as like an independent, because that's what he's continuing to say. He's like, I'm an independent. Even if he does run a Democratic primary, up till that point, he's going to tell everybody he's an independent so that both sides consider him. And I really think that he has like a broad left and right appeal that I don't know if I've seen in a long time. The only other like celebrity person who could have a similar clout would be like Jon Stewart, which I would be emphatically excited about, because he does have that, in that sort of energy, but he actually is grounded and has really good opinions. Yeah. I don't know how that would fare with him being a 5'7" Jewish man and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. I don't know if that would I don't know. I don't know if him being too political is going to work against him. I think he could have a shot too if he tried, but I still think nobody's who's shown interest in running has a better chance right now than Stephen A. Smith. The only other honorable mentions is like J.B. Pritzker is interesting. Even though he's pretty liberal, he looks like a Republican, and that's probably good enough for a lot of independents. And like I said, Tim Walz, I still think.
Yeah,
and that's my word.
Yeah,
that's my word.
Yeah. I'm in Minnesota, so Tim's our governor. So we've had a lot of Tim Walz. I know he does plan on running for governor again. Is what it does sound like, but which would be in 26. So that would be what he would take office 27. So I kind of have doubts that he does plan on running. I know he was pretty. I'm not. I don't want to be president was pretty much his thing. So we'll see what happens there. I know Kamala's always been floated out there too, and obviously she has the highest polling, but it's we're just so far away from it. What does any of that matter? Yeah. But also at the same time, I really think she's just run for governor of California. Do it. Nixon couldn't. Or something like that. And obviously if she runs for governor of California, she better not she would basically be jumping right into a presidential race at that time. So it's got to be one or the other. So I guess we'll find out what she does in the near future. I definitely wouldn't expect her to run for president.
We do forget that her opponent is going to be JD Vance, not Trump. So really, like the idea that Kamala Harris is cooked for her presidential odds. If she ran again, she would have a better chance against JD Vance than she did against Trump, in my opinion. But maybe I'm
right. There's so much that's unknown because you say it's not going to be against Trump, and technically, no, Trump can't run for a third term. There's the doomer in me, of course. Says, who knows? If there will be an election, that's not a non-zero chance.
Will he even be alive at that point?
Yeah. Well, we've already suffered the sweet embrace of nuclear annihilation. But if Trump says I'm running in the primary and he wants to pretend it's like a regular election, the GOP will nominate him, even though he'll be 80, 86 or 5 or whatever. Then so
wouldn't that need a constitutional amendment?
I mean, sure, but at the same time, I mean, if you're going to go by constitutional amendment, then by all means, Trump is not even qualified for the office as is. So, it's kind of that, you gotta, sure, they're words on a paper, but you gotta enforce that somehow. And that's, I don't know how you necessarily enforce it, but yeah,
what do you guys think about that idea has been floating around that JD Vance would run and name him as VP, and then all of a sudden JD Vance will step aside and then he'll get the third term? How much truth do you guys think that is?
Well, Trump could I don't even know if it's a VP, but Trump technically could do another 2 years. He can't do a full term. So he could theoretically, in a crazy world in which Trump was not like a dementia-ridden patient or whatever, he could for 2 years have one VP. Then at that 2-year point, he could drop that VP or fire him and then nominate Trump or something like that, because then technically he is able to serve and he isn't able to surpass the 2-year limit or the 2 years and 1 day limit or whatever, because I think they're supposed to I don't know, there's something where you can serve for 10 years. So but what would he be, 86 at that point?
Yeah.
How old would he be?
Right.
There's no way. I don't even know if he's going to get through this term because he's not a healthy person. Plus,
wow,
any point based on.
But we can't say that anymore, Seth.
I'm not saying. I'm not justifying. I'm not saying he should. I'm just saying, he's angry in every country on the planet. Anybody from any other country could just decide that's not worth it. And we've never had a more adversarial president in our entire life. I'm just saying foreign adversaries, I'm not saying anything about Americans, just saying there's a lot of people he's angry and
yeah, he's making upset.
He is old. He could just die tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. Right. And there's just so many possibilities, there's that but when it does come down to the third term thing, there is a colorable argument regarding the whole run as VP or, become Speaker of the House and, those kinds of tricks. And that's the thing is they're colorable arguments. They haven't been tested. So, as far as what a court could or would say, that we don't know.
Exactly.
But I think in reality, if he's gonna really try the third term stuff, he's just gonna do it.
Yeah.
I mean that's the thing. He's just gonna do it. And once again, we don't know the state of what state of basically the destruction of all the rules that we know and rely on. How much of that will be there come 2028, with just such a relentless attack already on them. So who knows? It's really what it comes down to. And, I guess we'll get there when we get there, but he could also be completely impeached and, you know, gone and out of office. And, you know, Congress, you know, if they really, things do get bad and they really do unite, at least on a basic front that, you know, JD Vance, we will impeach you in the matter of 45 seconds if you, you know, step out of, you know, outside of any reasonable line, you know, and kind of keep them in check during that time. I guess, yeah, who knows? There's just so